Chapter 83. When Siddle got out of the car, she also told Belch to take down the bow and arrows. Charlie climbed out of the car, half believing, half doubting, walked around the forest path once, and when he didn't see anyone, he turned back and complained unhappily, "What a loser." "He's not a loser," Siddle sighed quietly, "it's because he doesn't want to take us into town." She shook the brim of her raincoat, tightened her clothes, and turned back to look at Charlie. "You take the shotgun, we'll go inside and find the belt." Siddle conveniently took the policeman's shotgun, Belch took the bow and arrows, and Charlie took the shotgun. Now there was only the big chainsaw and the crossbow left in the car. Policeman John nodded. "Penelope and I will wait here for everyone to return." He knew why someone had to stay in the car, not only because the two of them were injured, but also to keep an eye on this car. Siddle rubbed her cold cheeks, glanced at Belch absent-mindedly, patted his shoulder, curled the corners of her lips. Her voice was not loud but Belch heard it and shivered. "Be mentally prepared," she said. "There are only 3 of us now." And Charlie was not very trustworthy. Belch was suddenly entrusted with an important mission. It was just that he was a little panicked. He quietly tested the bow and arrow in his hand, feeling that with the speed of this thing, if he encountered danger later, he was afraid that before he could pull the bow, it would be GG, game over. Seeing his expression, Siddle couldn't help but giggle. "All right," she said listlessly, "this is just for you to hold for show. If anything happens, you don't need to rush forward." She finished speaking and sneezed again. "Siddle." She rubbed her nose and sighed in her heart. This time she went home, she was afraid that she would get sick. Charlie said a few words to his wife Penelope and then took his gun and walked forward. Several people gathered together and walked towards the town. In the dark sky, a heavy rain covered the entire small town that had been abandoned for many years. There was only a little light from the flashlight, flickering in the darkness. After walking on the stone path to cross a small river, they could consider themselves to have truly entered the town. This town looked normal. The area was not large, the houses were modernly built close together, the streets were clean, but there was no one in sight. The deserted alleys under the pouring rain made the atmosphere somewhat strange. "Is there really no one living here?" Charlie frowned unconsciously. "It doesn't look like there is no one living here." "Siddle, no one." Her tone was both resolute and affirmative. As she finished speaking, suddenly, a warm yellow light shone down. Siddle raised her head and saw the second floor of a villa a few meters away. The curtains were suddenly opened by someone. An old woman with a stiff face stood behind the curtains. She seemed to be looking down at the people below for a few seconds, and then suddenly closed the curtains. "Charlie," he said, "look, there are indeed people in this town." Siddle was silent for a moment and calmly said, "I said there are no people, then there are no people." She raised her eyes to look at the 2-story villa and slowly said, "We have never been to this town before, but according to the news we received from Colm, this town has been abandoned for more than 10 years, and there is no one living there." "Charlie. Not a living person, is it a ghost?" As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the curtains on that floor open again. The old woman with a stiff and expressionless face looked down at them. After a few seconds, she suddenly closed the curtains again. Her expression, movements, and posture were exactly the same as last time. Nothing had changed. Charlie choked, a chill suddenly ran down his spine, his lips trembled, hearing Siddle continue to speak leisurely, "Of course it's a wax statue." This news was revealed by Colm when he told about the town's past. "If it's not a wax statue, but something that can move." Siddle pondered. "Because we are naive and kind, we believe Colm's words that there is absolutely no way that there are living people in this town. So, if we see something moving, it could be a wild animal from the forest running here. Just use a hunting gun to shoot them." The more Siddle spoke, the more she felt that her logic was very smooth. She patted Charlie on the shoulder with satisfaction and gave him an encouraging look. "Charlie. Could this be the legendary self-consistency logic?" Self-consistency logic is a linguistic principle, that is, a theory that has no contradictions when it is stated. People, through analyzing the sentences and punctuation, cannot find any contradictions in that theory. The theory achieves perfection. So the wax statue that can move on that floor. He pointed at the old lady on the second floor. In just a few dozen seconds, she, or rather it had opened and closed the curtains several times. Do we need to shoot it? No need, Siddle said, it's just something supported by machines. She thought for a moment and then said, don't shoot randomly. The wax statues here are so realistic. Even through the rain, one could still see the old lady by the window looking so lifelike. It was so realistic that it made one's hair stand on end, as if it wasn't a work of art but a living person. Siddle walked forward without stopping as she spoke. Since the town wasn't big, she could see the location of the gas station at a glance. She was a little excited, but she tried to keep her expression steady and didn't show it. She just held a flashlight and walked around the small repair shop. When she didn't see anyone, Siddle was about to go in. She turned around and asked Belch and Charlie, what are the specifications of your belts? Before leaving Colm's truck, the policeman had told Siddle and the three of them the specifications of the police car's belt. After the two reported the specifications, they realized that the belt specifications on their cars were the same. Siddle thought for a moment and said, you and Charlie will observe the situation outside first, and I'll go in and look for something. It would be safer if the two of them stood guard. Charlie and Belch looked at each other and didn't object. Siddle walked into the repair shop, casually touched the table, rubbed her fingers, and found that this place was actually very clean, without a speck of dust. It didn't look like there was anyone there. Her face was tense, her hands quickly rummaging through the toolbox. There was no belt in the toolbox. She looked back at the wall and saw a bunch of belts hanging there, but none of them were the right size. Siddle began to feel anxious. She touched the pistol on her waist, trying to think of another way when she suddenly heard a noise outside. Fuck! Fuck! The man's loud curses rang out, followed by Charlie rushing in a panic, shouting loudly, Belch is missing. The moment he ran in, Siddle pulled down a belt from the wall, turned around, pointed the gun at him, and coldly said, stop. If you take another step, I guarantee you won't be able to leave this town. Charlie's eyes flashed with calculation, and he raised his hand without hesitation. I just came in to report the situation to you. Just now, Belch and I were standing outside. I looked to the left, he looked to the right. I made sure they were standing with their backs to each other. I didn't do. Siddle, then what? She was still holding the gun. As she asked, she slowly put the belt in her hand on her body and tied it around her waist like a belt. Charlie stared at the belt around her waist, pretending to be ashamed, and said, but before we could take a few steps, someone suddenly jumped out from the woods dash. That man was very strong. I'm not his match anyway. He took Belch away. I originally intended to shoot him, but he was very cunning, grabbed your younger brother and blocked him, took 2 steps back and then ran away on a car. I don't have a light, and I can't see where he drove, so I had to come here to find you first. Siddle looked at him for a few seconds and suddenly smiled. Okay, she said slowly, I believe you're innocent. It's probably the bad guys in this town who took Belch away. Let's go find him now. Charlie. If you believe me, then put down your gun. He looked a little uneasy, and looked at Siddle and asked, have you found our belt? Of course, Siddle calmly replied, but there's only one in the store, and I got it. Siddle only had a belt tied around her waist. Charlie looked straight at it, swallowed and said, why don't we leave first? With Officer John's urging, the road should be almost finished. Let's leave this dangerous place first, then call the police, wait for the police to come and rescue your brother. Seeing that Siddle didn't respond, Charlie continued, there are many people in our car, not only your brother, but also me, Penelope and the police officer. We are all innocent people. We can't delay here just because of you, right? What if the pervert who kidnapped your brother reappears and targets Penelope and the police officer? They are also injured. Siddle heard this and seemed moved and said, "But I only have one belt, and we have several cars. How to divide it?" Charlie's eyes lit up slightly, intending to take a step forward, but because the muzzle of the gun was dark, he could only stand still. "You can fix my car first, then Penelope and I will take you away. Today is the day Penelope and I are getting married. Our wedding ceremony hasn't been held yet. If it's any later, I'm afraid we won't be able to return in time. As long as you give me the belt, I can guarantee your personal safety. If you don't have a car, you can absolutely take my car. I can take you to the wedding venue first. Wait for the police to come rescue your brother. They should be able to fix the car for you too. By then everyone can leave. I'll give you some money. How much do you need? I guarantee that the balance on my card can satisfy you." Siddle? ? She tilted her head, looking confused, and laughed strangely. "Do I look like someone who lacks money? You're really smart." She sneered slightly, her eyes starting to lose patience. "If I don't find the missing person, I won't leave. As for you." She raised the gun in her hand, squinting slightly. "In the repair shop, only the belt in my hand can be used. I'm sure you won't be able to find a second one. Either find Belch and leave together. Or stay in town. As long as I don't agree, none of you can leave here, you choose." Siddle was completely unmoved. Charlie's eyes darkened slightly, revealing a sinister look in the darkness. His fingers holding the gun moved slightly.